Hi, welcome to Developmental Ladder, an interview podcast designed to connect parents and caregivers to professors and scientists who study human development from infancy into adulthood. Today, we spoke with Dr. David Geary, a distinguished curators professor at the University of Missouri. Given his years of experience researching sex differences and math abilities in children from a cognitive perspective, we discuss what are some ways parents should treat their children with a focus on academics and development, that is, social development, and how the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on development can be tackled, and so much more.
All right. So welcome to Developmental Ladder, Dr. David Geary. Would you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Dave Geary. I'm a curator's distinguished professor at the University of Missouri. We study mathematical cognition and learning, as well as sex differences in a variety of different topics.
All right. So as you mentioned, a lot of your work has gone into understanding the basic development of sex differences. What are some ways you suggest parents should be mindful in treating their infants equally as they grow and develop?
Yeah, so there have been several large-scale meta-analyses of parental treatment of boys and girls, at least in Western cultures. And there's not much difference, actually. So moms and dads generally treat boys and girls the same. Differences that do occur. So, for example, moms tend to talk more to daughters than to sons and hold them more eye contact, is probably due to the behavior of the kids and not any kind of stereotypes or whatever of the parents. So generally, most parents are doing just fine.
All right. So then going through different age ranges, are there any key things parents should look out for?
Should look out for?
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of their kids' development. Well, a lot of the development we see in kids is kind of the motivation to do it is built in. To engage in certain types of play, to engage in developing relationships with their peers, typically same-sex peers when they're younger. Boys will engage in certain types of activities. They'll form larger groups, more cohesive groups, often engage in competitive games. So they're learning to kind of coordinate, interact with one another, develop hierarchies, and so forth. Girls naturally engage in more dyadic sorts of friendships. So they share secrets and support one another and so forth. So a lot of that development is occurring kind of, you don't need any parental or teacher intervention for that. Kids just need to have the opportunity to play with other kids their own age or similar age.
Got it. So then moving on to focusing on some aspect of math and engineering, there's a common knowledge that there's far few women in the field of engineering and computer science for many different reasons. What are some ways you suggest parents could start nurturing their daughters to pursue this career path?
Yeah, so if we look at science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or STEM fields generally, and we look at US undergraduate and graduate education, and if we throw in medical school and veterinary school there, overall it's pretty balanced. There are about as many women as men, but more women than men are getting degrees in the life sciences.
Right.
And more men than women are getting degrees in more math intensive or thing oriented, like engineering, computer science areas. The folks who go into the thing oriented areas, there are a number of factors that contribute to that. One of them is just a greater interest in how objects, machines, and so forth work, or a greater interest in more abstract sorts of things rather than engaging directly with people or more broadly living things as a vet would do, for example. So there are basic sex differences and interests that contribute to these occupational and career, college major choices. These are very large differences and very robust. They're found across countries, and they're found across generations.
Mhm.
There's probably a biological basis to
Okay.
some extent to it. There are girls who have STEM profiles,
Mhm.
so they're better at math and science than they are at reading.
Right.
These are the girls, and especially if they have high levels of achievement, these are the girls who would do well in engineering or computer science if they chose to do that. I'm working on a large scale study now with a colleague in England looking
Mhm.
at adolescent occupational aspirations, sex differences in this for 15, 16-year-olds. And it's like 475,000 kids,
Okay.
random sample across 80 countries.
Mhm.
And we find a lot of those girls with that profile, math,
Mhm.
science greater than reading. Some
You
of them
just cut out after math science as you were explaining that. Yep. Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. So a lot of the girls with a STEM academic profile, where science and math are pretty high and higher than reading,
Mhm.
are interested in the life sciences. So a lot of them want to go into medicine or clinical psychology or psychology generally. And not as many of them as boys with the same profile want to go into engineering or computer science.
Right.
Possibly due to differences in interest. We're not exactly sure about that. But in any case, it's the girls that have this profile. They're really good at math and science, maybe don't like reading as much. That would be kind of the best target for
Okay.
getting more girls into engineering.
Right. So if,
And
let's say, parents identify that their daughters or children are better in these thing fields more than the other field, then if they get them to introduce to a thing like activities like robotics or so and so, and then that would be one path to introduce them to this field, then basically.
yeah, it could be. I don't think it's been directly tested.
Okay.
The broader issue, though, is if we take those girls and kind of get them into engineering or computer science, we may wind up with fewer physicians down the line.
Okay.
So there's a trade-off.
Right. So moving on to more math abilities in children, there's a greater emphasis of your research on that. For all those concerned parents out there whose kids are struggling in math, is there anything research so far says in terms of accelerating their progress to get better at it, or just ways to help them slowly but steadily understand the concepts?
Yeah, I mean, probably slow and steady is the best.
Okay.
Even kids that struggle make progress. It's just the
Mhm.
rate of progress is a little bit slower than others. Yeah, I'm just finishing work on a large scale study that we release soon, showing that having a really solid grasp of arithmetic by the end of the elementary school years is critical to algebra preparation. And by arithmetic, it's not just knowing your math facts. You should know that you need to know standard procedures, how to do long division, understand the base 10 system, exponents, radicals, and so forth. So real mathematical arithmetic. And so the basics, if kids can get more basics with worksheets, extra practice, and so forth during the elementary school years, focused on arithmetic, that's likely to be beneficial for them, whether they're behind in math or even ahead in math.
That's like the core.
Yeah,
Got it.
That seems to be the core.
Okay. So then moving on to a more broader discussion, based on your research, like other than the things we have covered so far, what are your top suggestions? Like you have been, in this field, developmental and cognitive field, for a long time now. So like, what are some things that you suggest for parents would be like key things they should focus on?
Well, I think a lot of parents get a little too uptight about things, and they maybe worry a little bit more than they need to.
Hmm.
Um, Parents need to be focused on, in my opinion, the the developing academic abilities, not only mathematics but also reading.
Hmm.
Making sure they're not only at grade level but above grade level if they can do that for them,
Got it.
because the schools aren't quite as rigorous as we would like, at least
Hmm.
as I would like to see. Other aspects of kids' social emotional development, for
Hmm.
most kids, they take care of themselves there as long as they have safe areas to play and they have playmates to play with. They kind of develop their own peer relationships and so
Hmm.
forth, and things go fine, and parents don't need to worry about that other than providing opportunities for kids
Right.
to engage in them. Either or whatever that
Um,
might be, or they don't have any friends.
Sorry, you cut out after saying the word engage with
Uh,
peers, and
oh,
sorry.
okay, yeah. Sorry, I think it's my internet. I don't know what it is. Um, right. So uh, parents should be aware of and focus on adding to their kids' academic skills. Get them to read more, get them to do some more math at home, so forth. Um, the social and emotional stuff will develop for most kids pretty naturally, as long as they have safe play spaces and friends to interact with, and they kind of will figure it out themselves. There are about 10% or so of kids that have problems with peer relationships, either very inhibited or too aggressive or
Hmm.
whatever it might be. Those, those are the kids that would need some help for
Okay.
whatever reason. If they don't have a best friend that they can interact with, maybe they need to see a psychologist to kind of figure out what's going on there. If they're too aggressive with other kids, then other kids basically won't like them,
Yeah.
and they'll get rejected and socially isolated. So the social isolation um, is the big thing to worry about. If otherwise, probably things are fine.
All right. So then, speaking about friendships and having an area and space to play with, life has changed a lot through COVID-19, like this pandemic. What are some ways you suspect things have changed and people should tackle it to sort of eliminate the changes that have caused because of it?
Yeah, I think there's going to be multiple potentially long-term effects of
Hmm.
the COVID. The one of them is schooling, where a lot of kids have not got the same level of schooling as they would otherwise have.
Right.
And so that is going to need to be made up, because the competencies of reading, math, other general academic knowledge that you leave school with has lifelong influence on employability, wages, preparation for college, other sorts of things.
Mhm.
So kids, especially kids who are kind of at risk anyway, um, are really going to be in trouble if there isn't additional summer school or other things to kind of get them to where
Back up.
they should be. The social isolation, if they're locked down, didn't have access to peers or whatever for due to COVID,
Mhm.
um, could be a problem for a lot of kids as well. Hopefully they can interact or whatever on social media, on Zoom or whatever, at least get some social
Something.
contact.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to get kids re-engaged in normal relationships with their friends as soon as possible,
All
and
right.
engage in soccer, baseball,
Yeah.
whatever it is they would typically do.
All right. And then moving on to more about you.
Mhm.
If you do you have children, and if so, how has your research affected your own parenting of your children?
Yeah, so I have 3 kids, 2 from my first marriage and 1 from current marriage. The other kids are older and doing great. They're professionals and on their own and doing fine. And then currently I have an 8-year-old, and she's doing fine as well. I think what I've learned the most is that, kids development, a lot of it is going to occur regardless of what parents do, because a lot of it has to do with their relationships with their friends and just how they're developing as individuals. And so the parental parents worry too much, I think, in many cases about those things. The academic stuff doesn't develop as naturally as social skills, emotional regulation, and other sorts of more biologically based types of things. So the academic stuff probably needs more attention, at least for some kids, especially kids who are struggling in school.
All right. And then moving on to the last question for this interview, what would be the take-home message other than that parents need to tame it down a little bit and focus on the academics?
Yeah, take-home message, you have to let kids be kids. At times you have to give them the space to do it and not micromanage their lives and schedule everything for them to supposedly make them more competitive later on. They need to engage in more natural kind of child-directed activities with other kids, and they don't need constant parental supervision for that, as long as they're in a safe space.
All right.